Let's start by looking at a very standard simple interest problem. So we have question 1, the value of an investment of $5,000 invested over 5 years at 3% simple interest per year. So whenever we're given that this is specifically measuring simple interest, that's our indication to use the simple interest formula, so which is A equals P plus PRT. So we're looking for A, the amount of the future value. So we need to figure out what P is, what R is, what T is. So P is the principal, so that's the initial investment. So in this problem, that's $5,000. So that's what was initially invested. R is the rate of interest as a decimal. So we're told 3%, and we have to convert that into a decimal. So 3 divided by 100, that would be 0.03. And T is the time in years. So this was invested over a 5-year period. So T is 5. So we're just going to take those three values and put them into this simple interest formula and just evaluate. So we have 5,000 plus 5,000 times the interest rate, so 0.03, times the time in years, which is 5. So we'll just take this and evaluate it into any standard calculator. And when I did this, I got $5,750. So we take that $5,000, invested over 5 years at 3% simple interest per year. After 5 years, we'll end up with $5,750. Continuing with question 2 now. So we have Ada invests $4,500 into a fixed term investment. So that fixed term doesn't really modify the problem here, but that means that the investment is for a specific period of time. In this case, it's an 8-year period of time, and it earns 2.25% simple interest paid annually. So let's start with the A part. What is the future value of this investment at maturity? So anytime that we're told that we're calculating the simple interest and we want the future value, that's going to indicate that we're going to again revert to this formula, A equals P plus PRT, where P is the principal, R is the rate of interest as a decimal, and T is the time in years. So our principal, $4,500, plus the principal, so P, so again, that's 4,500, times R, the rate of interest as a decimal. So we have 2.25%. We're going to want to convert that to a decimal. So in doing that, that will be 0.0225. So we can also do that calculation by taking the 2.25% and dividing it by 100. So 0.0225. And the time in years is 8. And again, this calculation can be put into any sort of standard calculator, and I worked that out earlier and I got $5,400. So answer to part A, $5,400. So that's the amount of that the simple interest investment will be worth after an 8-year period at 2.25% interest. Now the B part, how much interest is earned on the investment? So we could approach this from one of two directions. So if you recall, we had a separate formula to specifically calculate the amount of interest earned in a simple interest investment. So that was I equals PRT. So basically it's this portion of the simple interest calculation. And I'm just going to do this in one line here. So we have $4,500. The annual rate of simple interest of 2.25% for 8 years. And this will give us a value of $900. So we could do that calculation. Alternately, however, notice that we have the initial amount that was invested here. So we invested $4,500. And then we check back in 8 years, and 8 years later, we have $5,400. Well, the change in that, the amount of money that we made in those 8 years has to be the amount of interest that was earned on the investment. So we could also do this calculation by figuring out how much we have in the future, subtracting how much we started with, and that will also give us the amount of interest that we earn. So 5,400 is what we have after 8 years. At the start, we had 4,500, and that will similarly give us $900. So both approaches are acceptable. Note that they both give us the same answer in the end. So it's really just preference onto which approach that you would want to take to solve this problem. Final question. Charles invests $4,000 at 2% simple interest. Part A, how long will it take for the future value of the investment to grow to $5,000? Now, once again, the moment we see this simple interest, we can be pretty convinced that it's going to be our formula A equals P plus PRT. However, we're not looking for the future value this time. The future value is actually given to us right here. Our future value is $5,000. What do we want to find? Well, we want to know how long it's going to take for this investment to grow to $5,000. What we're really looking for is T. So let's put in what we know. 5,000 is the future value that this investment is going to be worth, so that's our A value in this case. P is the initial investment. It's 4,000. Plus P, 4,000. Times R, the rate of interest, so 2%. That means 0.02. We could take that 2% and divide it by 100, so 0.02. Times T. We don't know what T is, but we're trying to solve it. So from this point, we're going to use some algebra in order to manipulate this equation. Well, 4,000 times 0.02. So let's start with that. So we have 5,000 equals 4,000 plus 4,000 times 0.02. I worked that out in my calculator and got 80 times T. So this is 80T. So our goal here is to get T by itself, which means that we're going to have to remove this 400 from the right-hand side of our equation and remove this 80 from the right-hand side of the equation. And the easiest approach to this is typically to remove things that are not directly being multiplied or divided by our variable t here, so what we're looking for. So we're going to subtract 4,000 from the equation on the right and subtract 4,000 from the equation on the left. Now, when we do that, 5,000 minus 4,000 leaves us with 1,000 on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, 4,000 minus 4,000, well, that's just 0. And I don't have to write that down. So 0 plus 80t, that's the same thing as just saying 80t. Now we want to solve for t. 80 is being multiplied by t, so we're going to do the inverse operation of multiplication. We're going to divide. So we'll divide by 80 on the right, and we'll divide by 80 on the left. 80t divided by 80 leaves us with t. 1,000 divided by 80 leaves us with 12.5. So how long will it take for this investment to grow to $5,000? So it will grow to $5,000 after 12.5 years. So remember that t is always measured in years, or 12 years and 6 months if you prefer. So that's our answer for part A. Let me put the A up here. Now let's go on and look at B. B asks, what is Charles's rate of return? So we want to find the rate of return. For shorthand, I'm going to use R. And we do have a formula for rate of return. So this is I over P. So we need to figure out what the initial investment was, P. And we need to figure out what the interest earned was I. Now, the initial investment is easy enough, so we can just look up to the problem. It says Charles invests $4,000. So $4,000 is our initial investment. Now we want to figure out what I is. Now we could figure out what PRT is, because that is our amount of interest which was earned, I. But it's not necessary. Our investment grows to $5,000 and started at $4,000. Well, what that tells us is that the amount of interest that was earned had to be $1,000. For this to grow from $4,000 to $5,000, it means that $1,000 was earned. And that means that our rate of return is going to be $1,000 divided by $4,000, 0.25. Now, what does a rate of return mean? What does a rate of return of 0.25 means? It means that for every $1 which was invested, we earned 25 cents of interest. So for every $1 that Charles invested, 25 cents was earned. That's what brought that $4,000 up to $5,000. So rate of return tells you your amount of earnings per $1 of investment. And that's our overview of Chapter 1.1, Simple Interest.